Zulaykha, the wife of this minister, presenting herself and aiming to entice or incite Yusuf alayhi salam. And she locks the doors and she opens up this opportunity of committing this sin. And Yusuf alayhi salam is pretty much closed off, and there is an open avenue, an open door to commit this sin, and he's able to persevere and he's able to deter from the pathway of sin and save himself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us how he saved himself, which I spoke about in the last session. And as he's leaving the room and as he's running away, the wife of this minister, you can say the wife of the prime minister of Egypt, she pretty much pulls his shirt and it rips. And as he's running, the door opens and the husband, which happens to be his master as well, his boss, his employer, is standing right in front. And the wife yells and screams out and she says, well, ما جزاء من أراد بأهلك سوءا إلا أن يسجن أو عذاب أليم. O husband, O master, there really can't be any consequence or punishment that is appropriate for such an offense except that this person should be imprisoned and he should be punished, meaning he should be humiliated in public. This is what adabun alim refers to, because of the fact that he aimed or tried to come for the honor of your wife. And as she yells this, and the last thing I spoke about before we ended the session was just because a person cries first or cries wolf first or makes the first statement to start the argument or makes the first statement to begin the claim, it doesn't necessitate that they're the victim or the culprit, right? Ultimately, we follow the hujjah and we follow proof. Where is there proof? And we lean towards that. Because oftentimes, whoever is louder, we will side with them. Whoever has a stronger propaganda machine, like how genociders do, people will side with him, right? But the reality of truth and in falsehood is that the truth may not be the loudest, it may not have the most, may not have the same level of display, but it will always be the loudest voice in the room. So Yusuf alayhi salam speaks up and he says, no, this is not me. This is her. This has nothing to do with me. And as Yusuf alayhi salam pleads his case, he says, قَالَ هِيَ رَاوَدَتْنِي عَنْ نَفْسِي. O king, I know your wife is an honorable person and you may not want to hear this. And this is why Imam Qurtubi rahmatullah alayhi narrates that Yusuf alayhi salam actually didn't say anything. When the king opened the door, he didn't say that she tried to hold me against my will. He kind of held back to keep her honor. He only spoke up when she made the claim against him, or else he was quiet. He says, O king, as much as your wife is an honorable person, she's the one that initiated this situation. She is the one that held me against my will. She intended me. Rawada comes from the root letters of irada. In Arabic, irada means to intend. Rawada is like a hyperbolized version of it. That she opened up every opportunity and window to entice me and to seduce me, and she closed every door for me to get out of it. So rawada, she's the one that did. An nafsi. An nafsi in Arabic over here means against my will. She did it against my will. Now, she responds to that and says, no, that's not true. He actually is the one that did this to me. And now they're going back and forth. Now they're having this back and forth, rebuttal. Now, how do you settle and look and find the truth in these situations? Well, you have two people who are both making claims. And it happens to us in our lives as well. One person says this, the other person has an absolutely, completely different story. One person is saying that this person did this to me, the other person is saying this never happened to me. Now, obviously, one of them are lying. But how do you ascertain and how do you figure out who is actually lying? Do you side with a personality? Do you side with perhaps the one who is more powerful? Because if we were to do that, that's not siding with the truth, that's siding with the person. Right? In the Prophet ﷺ, he highlights, or rather Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala highlights in the Quran, اِعْدِلُوا وَلَوْ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِكُمْ. Seek justice even if it means that it harms you. Meaning that even if it comes at your own expense, justice should be sought regardless of who the who the beneficiary is or who is harmed. Because justice is the greatest mandate in our social interactions. Allah begins Surah Fatiha by speaking about justice. Allah highlights justice to be one of His greatest qualities. And we know Umar radiallahu anhu to be the master of justice. The Prophet of Allah himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would say, look, لو سرقت فاطمة بنت محمد لقطعت يديها. If my daughter was to steal, I would cut her hand. Meaning, I would not impose the wrong ruling upon anyone, but I would also not concede the correct ruling because of who the person is. You know how we say in English, principle over personality, right? The truth will always win. So how do we decipher? Like for the king, this is a very difficult moment. This is a slave who I can throw under the bus. This is why this Aziz was, as the Mufassirun say, a good man, a believing man. Because he could have easily took upon the claim of his wife, and it would have made more social sense for him, based upon his rapport, based upon, the social credibility that he had. But he sought the truth. How often we find even in relationships that sometimes for those that perhaps have experienced this, or for those that have friends that have experienced this, so the husband and wife, one is wronged, and almost 99% of the time, the parents will always side with their own son or daughter. They won't even listen to the other party. The Prophet says, it is enough for a person to be unjust if they rule before they hear the opposite party's statement and the opposite party's angle. There's a story in the Quran about Dawood alayhi salam, where there's people that jumped over his roof. And as they jumped over their roof, they jumped over their roof, and they say, Inna hada akhi lahu 99 na'ja wa liya na'jatun wahida. That they say that one of the individuals, they jumped over into his house, they snuck into his house. And Dawood alayhi salam was unique. He was a president, he was a qadi, and he was a prophet. But he was also the qadi. So they come to him and say, hey man, look, this brother of mine, he has 99 goats. I have one goat. And this brother of mine and I'll give you a simpler example for our time. This brother of mine owns 99 shares of the company. I own 1 share of the company. And this brother of mine is trying to buy me out and kind of complete his monopoly. Do I have to sell it to him? Or can I keep my 1 share? It's a very simple question. It doesn't require that Dawood alayhi salam listens to the other party, because there's not really much to ask the other party about. If this is your 1 share, you absolutely do not have to sell it to the other person. So he gives that ruling, and the story is over. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals in the Quran, in this same story, that Dawood alayhi salam, for him this was a mistake. It was not a sin. Prophets don't sin, but it was an error. وَلَقَدْ Allah says in that same verse, فَغَفَرْنَا لَهُ ذَلِكَ. We forgave him for it. And he says, يَا دَاوُد إِنَّا جَعَلْنَاكَ خَلِيفَةً فِي الْأَرْضِ فَاحْكُمْ بَيْنَنَا بِالْقِسْطِ. O Dawood, we have made you an ambassador on the earth. Make sure you rule and judge between people with the truth and being honest. He didn't have the wrong judgment. The judgment would not have changed. Oftentimes we say, my conclusion would not have been different if I heard what you said. That's not the point though. We are process-centric, we're not outcome-driven. Even if my conclusion would not have changed, if I heard your part of the story, I still need to hear it. Because it closes any opportunity of being biased in your decision or in your judgment for that person. So Dawood alayhi salam is reprimanded as a prophet of Allah, that you never heard both sides of the story though. Why did you make a judgment without hearing the other brother, who the other brother is wrong because he's trying to overthrow his brother's company. He's in the wrong for sure. There's no question about it. فَحْكُمْ بَيْنَنَا بِالْقِسْطِ. Judge with honesty and truthfulness. One of the greatest challenges is that when you do have a relationship and something does happen, the bias of each person kicks in. So the mother will think that, no, my daughter or my son is correct. How can my daughter or my son be incorrect? And the father will think the same. And now you really can never have sulh. People struggle in our time, especially when we deal with situations, whether it's marriages or sibling conflicts, it becomes so difficult to create a level ground where people have sulah and they're able to reconcile, because each person believes without any doubt that this person is right. My party is correct. My party can never be wrong. But prophets can be wrong. Which sky or which cloud did we come from that we can't be wrong? So in this entire discussion, we're taught, how do you find the truth? And a person can only find the truth if they're pursuing it. Or else it's very easy to reach a conclusion without searching for the truth, because that's our bias. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the father, or rather the husband, which is the master of Yusuf, he sought the truth. He wanted to know what actually happened. So he seeks the truth. وَشَهِدَ شَاهِدٌ مِنْ أَهْلِهَا. So a witness from the family spoke up. Someone from the family, someone from Ahl can be used for two meanings. It can mean immediate family. Ahl can also mean people who live in the household of this person. So for example, sometimes someone's not from your family, but they live with you, especially back home in our countries, right? Maybe a cousin, maybe even a maid or someone who works for you, a servant. So shahida shahidun min ahliha. Someone spoke up from the family. Imam Qurtubi rahmatullahi alayhi, he mentions that there can be three opinions of who this person is. Because Allah doesn't say, وَشَهِدَ, for example, رَجُلٌ مِّنْ أَهْلِهَا, that this man spoke up, or this woman spoke up. Allah simply says what? Someone spoke up. This also gives us clear indication. This is profound, by the way. That the person speaking up and being the individual who is reconciling and seeking the truth for you on your behalf, the person is not that important as long as they're not unjust. The person doesn't matter as much as long as they have adl within themselves, as long as they're upright and truthful. Because Allah doesn't highlight the individual, He highlights what he did. He sought the truth. So Imam Qurtubi says that it could have been a child. This is the majority opinion. This was a tifl kana fil mahd. That he was a baby, like literally a baby, who was in a cradle. And so there's no way Zulaykha could have thought that this child would speak up. But when the Prophet ﷺ says that there were three children or three toddlers that spoke in the age that they should not have spoken in, like while being in the cradle, he mentioned three. He mentioned Isa alayhi salam, child in the cradle, of course. Then he mentioned this story, Shahid fi qissati Yusuf, like this story right here. And the third one he mentioned was within the story of Musa alayhi salam, that a child, when Musa alayhi salam was accused of committing a sin and having a relationship with someone, and the child, when he was born, the child spoke up and said, Musa is not my father. Ya ayyuhal ladina amanu la takunu kal ladina adaw Musa. Under this ayah, this discussion takes place as well. But it could have been a child, it's possible. And this is what majority of the mufassirun would share. There's a second opinion. This wasn't a child. This was actually someone from the servicemen of that household. Like the people who were close to this prime minister. They would serve him. There were people who would walk in and out of the house. They had the keys of the house, but they never lived in the house. So it happened so that they walked into the house at that time. So she didn't think anyone was in the home, but this man who had access to the home came to fulfill a task of his, and he noticed what happened. Number three, it could have actually been someone who was not a child, not like a worker, but a very intelligent man who was hakim, wise, who was brought in as a third party to help decide and reconcile who was wrong, who was right. So he wasn't even someone that was a part of that home. He wasn't someone that was inside the home when this happened. He was just someone who was brought in as a third party. How Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even mentions in the Quran, when we have disputes, bring a third party in that both of you agree upon. So this third party person came in and he gave this kind of mandate. Now regardless of who it was, the majority opinion is that it was a child. But we can concede that it could have been any of those three. But regardless of who it was, what this person shares gives us clarity on how we seek the truth. This person doesn't begin by speaking about the virtues of Yusuf, or doesn't speak about the honor of the queen. He simply speaks about the facts. إِن كَانَ قَمِيصُهُ قُدَّ مِن قُبُلٍ. He starts off by saying, if his shirt is ripped from the back, from the front. إن كان قميصه قد من قبل. If the shirt is torn from the front, فصدقت, then she speaks the truth, and he is the one that is lying. وهو من الكاذبين. وإن كان قميصه قد من دبر. And if the shirt is ripped from the back, فكذبت, then she has lied. وهو من الصادقين. And he is amongst the truthful ones. He doesn't even speak about the person, Yusuf, or the wife of the minister. He hones in on what can serve as a clear symbol or a clear reference of the truth. So if we're involved in a situation, I'm not siding with either of you. I'm giving you a simple reference that if you see this, that means this person is wrong. And if you see that, that means that person is wrong. Another thing that we learn from the story is that this individual, this testimony was not used in court because it didn't hold weight to be in court. For a testimony to be held in court, a person would have to see it. البينة على من ادعى واليمين على من أنكر. Like you would have to testify that I saw it. But this testimony is not being used in court. It's being used to create clarity in regards to the family. But sometimes, everyone always says that, you need to have clear proof for someone to be right or wrong. That's for a judgment. That's not for the clarity of your mind and heart. You can use different elements to describe the truth or to get to the truth for yourself or for your family or for your situation. So it's not like this case was taken to court and this testimony was used against the wife of the minister. If that was the case, she would have been punished. She was not punished. So it was just to clear the air that Yusuf a.s. is not guilty. So if the shirt from the front, for obvious reasons, because if the shirt was ripped from the front, that means he is the one that is coming upon her. And for obvious reasons, if the shirt was ripped from the back, that means she was the one that was chasing him. And I mentioned this in our last session as well, that in order for a person to avoid sin, there is no option of slowly walking away from it. The only way to avoid that sin that is presenting itself is to run away from it. Often we find ourselves, all of us, oftentimes that if there's an opportunity of sin, we'll walk, but then we'll take one step forward and take two steps back, figuratively, of course. We'll walk forward, then we're like, oh man, you know what? Oof, that food does look really good. I know it's not halal, but it just looks, it has my name on it, or whatever it may be, that job, I know it's haram income, but it's just so attractive. The only way to really get away from that sin is to run away from it. فَفِرُّوا إِلَى اللَّهِ. Run from it. People who are involved in even haram relationships, people step away, then they come back. No, you run away from it. You close the door of return. This is why Allah says, تَوْبَةً نَصُوحًا. That sincere tawbah means that any door that can be left open that allows me to come back to that sin has to be closed. If there's any door that is left open, that means that I have not done tawbatan nasuha. I've kept that door open. I've turned away from the sin, but I've kept that door open for me to return to that sin. So he runs away. And when he runs away, it only makes sense that the shirt could not be torn in this manner if he had not run. If he had walked away, she could pull the shirt and tug on it, but it would not be ripped. He ran, and he ran to a locked door. So he says, if the shirt is ripped from the back, then she is lying and he is a truthful one. In both cases, a subtle kind of reference in these verses is that in both cases, the actual verb affiliation is given to her. Fasad, for those of you that have studied some Arabic, for those of you that haven't, inshallah, we'll be starting soon. In both cases, the shahid, the witness, is saying فَصَدَقَتْ and وَكَذَبَتْ. فَصَدَقَتْ and كَذَبَتْ, which means that either she is telling the truth or she is lying, meaning she is the actual, she's the one that's actually making the claim. Because she made the claim, either she's lying or she's telling the truth. He doesn't refer it to Yusuf. Some of the Mufassirun say it's because it would be incorrect and almost disrespectful to refer to Yusuf a.s. by saying that he may be lying. So the actual reference is made to her. that she is lying or she is telling the truth. And obviously, وإن كان قميصه قد من دبر فكذبت وهو من الصادقين فلما رأى قميصه قد من دبر. And when they saw that the shirt was ripped from the back, it was clear to the king that the wife was at fault, though she was the first one to make the claim. Just because you spoke up first doesn't mean that you own the truth. Just because you spoke up first does not mean you own how the optics will run. It can change, and the truth will always expose falsehood. Right? It's a matter of time. This is why the Day of Judgment is Yawm al-Furqan, because all lies are exposed. And ultimately, at times, some people have to wait till that day. And we would hope that we don't have to wait till that day for the oppression that is done to us and to the Muslimin. Right? But generally, it does get exposed. A person can only hide the truth for so long. The truth looks for a way out. So he says that, okay, now the shirt is ripped from the back. That means Yusuf is the one that is innocent. The man that is the shahid, he says, "Innahu min kaydikunna." This is from your plots, meaning the plot of the wife. You made this plot. You made this plan. The word kayd in Arabic generally is used because there's different words in Arabic that mean plan. The word kayd in Arabic is used when a plan is planned in secrecy, is plotted in secrecy, and it has some negative intention. So for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to the plan of the army of Abraha, the army of the elephants. He says, "Alam yaj'al kaydahum," because they planned this in secrecy and they had negative intent to harm the people of Mecca. So whenever the word kayd is used, it comes with a negative connotation that they had a negative plan. And it also comes with the idea that it was done in secrecy. This is what Zulaykha did. قَالَ إِنَّهُ مِنْ كَيْدِكُنَّ. Verily your plan, this was your plot, to try to entrap Yusuf alayhi salam, to try to use this as blackmail against him. And how often this happens? When someone gets pulled into something that is incorrect, immoral, or haram, whatever it is, or all three, and then they made this mistake and someone will use it against him. Right? قَالَ إِنَّهُ مِنْ كَيْدِ. It's your plot, your plan. You can't run away from it. And then he says, إِنَّ كَيْدَكُنَّ عَظِيمٌ. And verily your plans and your plots, he's saying to the wife of the Aziz, are very intense, they're very severe. The word azim, and this is for males, of course the situation, Zulaykha is the one that's causing this issue. Right? So the shahid is saying, verily you, meaning the female, your plots against the man are very extreme. And this is not something which is inconsistent in our sharia or in the prophetic tradition. One of the greatest hooks of shaitan for males is the opposite gender. إِنَّ كَيْدَكُنَّ عَظِيمٌ. It's a kaid that people get caught in. And vice versa as well. It doesn't mean that it doesn't happen the other way, but in the story it's very clear that she's the one that is making this plot to entrap Yusuf. And this is where we understand that, we never trust our own taqwa. We don't trust ourselves to put ourselves in moments of compromise because we think that our level of taqwa or our ability to contain ourselves or our ability to hold back is better than someone else's. It's not. It's not. Everyone has the same, we're all humans. Even Adam alayhi salam, who was told not to eat from the tree, ate from the tree. Though he had many opportunities to eat from any other tree. The nature of it is that we don't seek any form of we never believe that if we're in that situation, Allah will say, we'll be okay. No. So we try our best to run away as far as possible from those opportunities. We turn away from this. Is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا. Don't even come close to adultery. Don't come close to it. I.e., don't open up a window or an opportunity where now you have to actually exercise taqwa. Just don't be there for it. Because now if you have to exercise it in that moment, well, you may be able to use your taqwa and to survive and persevere, or you may cave in. إِنَّ كَيْدَكُنَّ عَظِيمٌ. The kaid is very heavy, the plot is very heavy. And it's difficult to turn away from. So, yeah, it may just be, one text message or one interaction, But ultimately, am I compromised? Because if I'm compromised, then it requires great resistance and strength of taqwa to be able to pull back. So it's better not to be in that situation anyways. إِنَّ كَيْدَكُنَّ عَظِيمٌ. Therefore we have barriers in Islam that Allah has put between both genders, right? In regards to how we can speak to each other, how we interact with each other. We're not strangers. What I find to be problematic at times is people who attempt to be in the outside world or at college. There is a level of there's more, I guess, ease in how we interact, right? And when we come to places like Miftah or the Masjid, there's a sanctity of the place itself. So whether or not we carry ourselves in a certain way outside, right? And by the way, those areas require that. If I'm working with someone, I have to interact with them. I can't be working with the opposite gender and say, oh, no, astaghfirullah, I'm Muslim. Like, bro, don't work here. Work somewhere else. You chose the wrong career, right? Similarly, I can't be in a university where a professor is a male and say, I don't want to sit with you. Like, well, you failed. You better sit with me, right? So ultimately, the idea is the situations will require those kind of like compromised moments or compromised situations. But in places that are sanctity, we hold ourselves at a higher level. Now, it doesn't mean, people always ask, does it mean that if I'm walking by, can I say salam? Do I not say salam? Like there's an entire list of questions that can take place in regards to gender interaction that maybe I can give a few minutes to ask. But that simple answer would be that if someone that you respect saw it, would it bother them and would it seem like your credibility is compromised in their eyes? That's the Prophet ﷺ was asked, Mal itham, what is a sin? And this can be used anywhere, but it can specifically be used in how we interact with the opposite gender. Mal itham, what is a sin? And the Prophet ﷺ responded by saying, Ma haka fi sadrik, wa karihta an yattali'a alayhi an-nas. A sin is that which kind of like eats you up inside. Like it bothers you. Now if a person doesn't have a spiritual heartbeat, they won't be able to experience that anyways. It's like telling someone, man, like what is unhealthy food? Unhealthy food is that which gives you this issue in your stomach. You're like, yo man, I don't even feel it, so it must be healthy. No, it's not healthy. Your stomach is so unhealthy, your gut is so unhealthy that you don't even feel how toxic this food is. So if a person's spiritual heartbeat is dead or it's numb, they may not even feel this. But for all of us, we would hope that we have a spiritual heartbeat that we will be able to experience this. Ma haka fi sadrik. What eats you up inside, it kind of like makes you feel uncomfortable, which is a beautiful quality. The Prophet ﷺ was asked, who is a believer? The Prophet ﷺ was asked, who is a believer? This response, you guys should write it down and memorize it if you can. Who is a believer? He says two things. إِذَا سَرَّتْكَ حَسَنَتُكَ وَسَاءَتْكَ سَيِّئَتُكَ فَأَنْتَ مُؤْمِنٌ. When the good that you do makes you feel good, and when the bad or the sins that you commit, that all of us will and have committed, make you feel bad, not guilt trip, not paralyzed, but they do make you feel a certain way, فَأَنْتَ مُؤْمِنٌ. Know that you are a believer. That is a sign of iman, that sense of fulfillment in doing good, and the sense of regret in committing a sin. That is a sign that a person's heart is alive. So, like if it bothers me, that means I shouldn't be doing it. وَكَرِهْتَ أَن يَطَّلِعَ عَلَيْهِ النَّاسِ. The second part of that hadith of what is a sin was that you would feel uncomfortable if people saw you in that moment. You would feel uncomfortable if people saw you in that moment. If I would feel uncomfortable if people saw me in this moment, that means I shouldn't be doing it. Right? Because the greatest mufti for the person is themselves. Istafti qalbak. We know whether or not we should have been doing it. So he said, Inna kayda kunna alim. Your plots are very heavy against Yusuf and vice versa. So it's avoid those situations completely. Then he says, Yusuf, a'rid an hada. Oh Yusuf, ignore this situation. Like move on. A'rid an hada. You obviously were not in the wrong. She was in the wrong. So you don't have to feel bad about it. You don't have to feel bad about it. Like, oh, she got caught. No, don't feel bad about it. a'rid an hada. Leave it alone. And then he turns towards the wife and he says, وَاسْتَغْفِرِي لِذَنْبِكِ. Seek forgiveness for your sin that you committed. Seek tawbah for the sin that you committed. إِنَّكِ كُنْتِ مِنَ الْخَاطِئِينَ. You are indeed from amongst the wrongdoers. Now, who is speaking right now? Who is the actual person saying, Yusuf, let it go? Wife, seek forgiveness. You are amongst the wrongdoers. Who is saying this? Two opinions. One is that the actual shahid, the hakim, the one who is arbitrating this case, he is the one saying this. But the stronger opinion is that it's actually the husband. It's actually the husband who is saying this. He's saying to Yusuf, I know that you were not at fault. We're good. And he's telling the wife that I know you committed this mistake, so seek repentance for it. And you were wrong, so seek forgiveness for it. Oftentimes, we're able to avoid feeling regret because of a justification that makes sense in our own head. So we don't even feel regret of the sin because in our head we think that no, that was something that we had no choice but to do. So he's telling her that there is no justification for this. إِنَّكِ كُنْتِ مِنَ الْخَاطِئِينَ. Right? One of shaitan's way of pacifying our ability to do tawbah is to make us justify the sin in our head. But even if we share it with someone else, it will seem kind of irrational. No, that doesn't really make sense. You should have avoided that situation completely. إِنَّكِ كُنْتِ مِنَ الْخَاطِئِينَ. We'll stop here. Next week, inshallah ta'ala, we'll begin with the story of the queen inviting all the other noble women in the families of the royal families into her home, and she presents Yusuf to them because of the mockery that she was facing. Inshallah, we'll start from there. But a few lessons once again from today's session that we've had. Number one, that always seek the truth, and the truth doesn't follow a person. The truth follows the facts. So seek the facts so that you can find the truth. Never make a judgment without hearing both sides. It would have been very easy for this person to say Yusuf is to be a prophet. Of course he's innocent, but he actually gave a kind of a factual analysis of who is truthful and who is false. We also learned from this that we, regardless of who we are, we avoid situations of compromise, because either we will be able to persevere like Yusuf, or we will fail because we don't have the same bandwidth of taqwa like Yusuf alayhi salam. And last but not the least, if we do commit a mistake, وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لِذَنْبِكَ, we seek forgiveness from it, because that forgiveness in itself is a sign of goodness for us. Sometimes Ibn Ata'ullah, rahmatullah alayhi, is a great thinker and a great writer in the Islamic tradition, but specifically the Sufiya tradition. He says, sometimes a good deed doesn't get a person as far in the eyes of Allah than a sin that a person seeks tawbah from. Right? Sometimes good deeds don't get a person as far in the eyes of Allah than a sin that a person committed and then they seek tawbah from it because of how they feel. So maybe that sin, because I sought the right amount of tawbah for it, brings me closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obviously, this is not empowerment to sin. This is, if it does take place, we have complete tawbah and istighfar that allows us to accelerate and move forward, inshallah ta'ala, in the eyes of Allah. May Allah bless you all, reward you all.